A 9-year-old boy gets beaten up after saving his little sister from a kidnapper. When the police arrive and begin questioning witnesses, the revealed identity of the kidnapper leaves everyone stunned. The morning sunlight filtered through the falla. Sheer curtains of the Martinez family's modest 2-story home on Maple Street, casting dancing shadows across the worn but spotless hardwood floors. In the compact kitchen, Elena Martinez stood at the stove, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun after working a 12-hour night shift at Riverside General Hospital. Despite her exhaustion, she hummed softly while stirring a pot of tomato sauce, the familiar ritual of preparing Saturday lunch for her children, bringing her a sense of normalcy that her chaotic work schedule rarely allowed. The kitchen bore the hallmarks of a single mother's careful budgeting. The appliances were older models, their white surfaces yellowed with age but maintained with meticulous care. Colorful drawings from 5-year-old Lily covered the refrigerator door like a gallery of innocent joy, while a collection of school achievement certificates for 9-year-old Danny hung proudly on the adjacent wall. The small dining table, scarred from years of homework sessions and craft projects, held a vase with fresh daisies that Elena had splurged on at the grocery store the day before, a small luxury that reminded her that beauty could exist even in their modest circumstances. From the living room came the sound of concentrated play, punctuated by Lily's delighted giggles and Danny's patient instructions. Elena smiled as she watched her children through the kitchen doorway, her heart swelling with the fierce protective love that had sustained her through 3 years of single parenthood. Danny sat cross-legged on the faded carpet, his serious brown eyes focused intently as he helped his little sister build an elaborate castle from wooden blocks. His dark hair fell across his forehead in the same stubborn way his father's once had, though Elena tried not to dwell on those memories. Higher. Danny, make it higher. Lily squealed, her golden curls bouncing as she clapped her hands together. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with the kind of pure excitement that only 5-year-olds could muster over something as simple as stacking blocks. She wore her favorite purple dress with tiny butterflies printed on it, the one Elena had found at a second-hand store, but which Lily treasured as if it were a princess gown. "Okay, but we need to be careful," Danny replied seriously, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility that had settled on his young shoulders far too early. "If we go too high without a strong foundation, the whole thing will fall down." He spoke with the deliberate precision of a child who had learned to think before acting, to consider consequences, to be the protector when no other adults were around. Elena felt a familiar pang of guilt watching her son's careful maturity. At 9 years old, Danny had already appointed himself as the man of the house, a role she had never asked him to take but which he had assumed naturally after his father's departure. He helped with groceries, made sure Lily brushed her teeth, and never complained when Elena had to work double shifts to make ends meet. The weight of adult responsibilities showed in the careful way he moved, the serious set of his mouth when he thought no one was looking, and the protective stance he automatically took whenever strangers approached his sister. The living room itself reflected their family's resilience, despite financial struggles. The sofa, a deep blue sectional that Elena had bought used but which remained comfortable and inviting, dominated the space. Family photographs covered every available surface, pictures of birthday parties celebrated on tight budgets, holiday mornings where joy mattered more than expensive gifts, and countless candid moments that captured the genuine love that bound the three of them together. The coffee table, another second-hand find that Elena had refinished herself, bore the gentle scars of family life, water rings from countless mugs of hot chocolate, crayon marks from art projects, and the small chip in one corner where Danny had accidentally knocked it with his skateboard. "Mommy, look how tall our castle is," Lily called out, pointing proudly at the tower that now reached almost to her shoulder. "It's like the one in my princess book." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Elena replied, wiping her hands on her apron before walking over to admire their creation. She knelt down beside them, marveling at Danny's engineering skills and Lily's artistic additions. Small plastic flowers and toy horses decorated the castle grounds, creating a miniature fairy tale world that spoke to Lily's boundless imagination. Danny made sure it wouldn't fall down, Lily continued, wrapping her small arms around her brother's neck in an impromptu hug. He's the best builder in the whole world. Danny's serious expression softened into a genuine smile, the kind that transformed his entire face and reminded Elena that despite his premature maturity, he was still just a little boy who craved his sister's approval. "It's not that hard," he said modestly, though his chest puffed out slightly with pride. "You just have to think about balance and make sure each block supports the next one." Elena reached out to ruffle his hair affectionately. "You're going to be an architect someday, I think, or maybe an engineer." "Maybe," Danny replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe I'll be a police officer so I can protect people." The comment struck Elena with unexpected force. Even in his career aspirations, Danny's protective instincts shone through. She wondered sometimes if she had placed too much responsibility on his young shoulders, if her struggles as a single mother had forced him to grow up too quickly. But then she looked at the genuine contentment on both children's faces and reminded herself that love, not money, created the foundation of a happy childhood. "Speaking of protection," Elena said, settling more comfortably on the carpet beside them, "I wanted to talk to you both about something." She paused, choosing her words carefully. At 32, Elena was still young enough to hope for companionship, but old enough to be cautious about introducing new people into her children's lives. "You know, I've been talking to someone new lately. His name is James, and he seems really nice." Danny's expression immediately became more guarded, his protective instincts automatically engaging. "The man you went to dinner with last week?" Yes. That's right." Elena studied her son's face, recognizing the wariness there. Danny had been suspicious of every man who had shown interest in her over the past 3 years, though his concerns had proven unnecessary since none of those relationships had progressed beyond a few casual dates. "He's been very kind to me, and he says he'd like to meet you both soon. He understands that you two are the most important people in my life." Lily looked up from arranging tiny plastic trees around the castle. "Does he like castles?" Elena laughed softly. "I don't know. Sweetheart, maybe you can ask him when you meet him." "What does he do for work?" Danny asked, his tone serious and slightly formal. Elena recognized this voice. It was the one he used when he was trying to sound older and more responsible than his years. "He works in business. Something with computers and helping companies organize their information." Elena realized as she spoke that James had been somewhat vague about the specifics of his job, but she had attributed that to him not wanting to bore her with technical details. "He drives a nice car and dresses professionally, so he must be doing well for himself." Danny nodded slowly, processing this information with the gravity of a much older person evaluating a potential threat to his family's security. "When is he coming over?" "Well, we haven't made specific plans yet. I wanted to talk to you both first and make sure you were comfortable with the idea." Elena reached out to touch Danny's hand gently. "Your opinion matters to me, honey. Both of your opinions matter. If you don't feel good about meeting him, we can wait longer." The truth was that Elena felt conflicted about James herself. After 2 months of dating, he remained somewhat mysterious, sharing stories about his work and travels, but revealing little about his personal history or family background. He had been attentive and charming, bringing her flowers and taking her to nice restaurants, but there was something slightly too polished about his behavior, as if he were performing a role rather than simply being himself. Still, Loneliness was a powerful motivator, and James represented the possibility of adult companionship and perhaps even a father figure for her children. "I guess it would be okay to meet him," Danny said finally, though his reluctance was evident. "But maybe not today? Today feels like it should just be us." Elena felt a rush of love for her thoughtful son. "You're absolutely right. Today is just for us. How about we finish lunch and then maybe we can walk to the park? The weather is perfect for it. Can we bring the soccer ball?" Lily asked excitedly, already abandoning the castle in favor of this new adventure. "Of course we can. Danny, will you help her find her sneakers after lunch?" "Sure, Mom." Danny began carefully dismantling the block castle, sorting the pieces by size and color with the methodical precision that characterized all his activities. Even in play, he approached tasks with a seriousness that sometimes worried Elena. She wondered if he would ever feel free to be truly carefree, or if the responsibilities he had taken on would always weigh on him. The phone rang suddenly, its shrill tone cutting through the peaceful morning atmosphere like a knife. Elena glanced at the caller ID but didn't recognize the number. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. Saturday mornings were sacred family time, and she rarely answered unknown calls. But something about the persistence of the ringing, the way it seemed urgent and demanding, made her hesitate. "I should probably get this," she said apologetically, rising from the floor and brushing dust from her jeans. "It might be the hospital." She picked up the cordless phone from its base on the kitchen counter, noting that the caller ID showed only a string of numbers without a name attached. "Hello? Miss Martinez?" The voice on the other end was male, older, with an authoritative tone that immediately commanded attention. "This is Dr. Williams from Riverside General Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Patricia Gonzalez." Elena's blood turned to ice. Her mother, who lived alone in a senior apartment complex across town, was 73 and generally healthy, but Elena knew that emergencies could happen without warning. "What's wrong? Is she okay?" "Miss Martinez, I'm afraid your mother has been in a serious automobile accident. She was brought to our emergency department about 20 minutes ago." The doctor's voice was grave, professional. "She's conscious and stable, but she's been asking for you specifically. She seems quite distressed and keeps saying she needs to see her daughter immediately." Elena's hands began to shake. From the living room, she could hear Danny explaining to Lily how to sort the blocks by color, their innocent chatter a stark contrast to the emergency unfolding through the phone. "How serious is it? What kind of injuries does she have?" "She has sustained some significant trauma, Miss Martinez. I can't go into all the details over the phone, but I really think you should come to the hospital as soon as possible. She's been quite agitated, and seeing you might help calm her down. Sometimes the emotional support of family is just as important." As the medical treatment, Elena felt torn in two directions. Her mother needed her, but leaving her children alone felt wrong, especially for what could be hours at the hospital. "Dr. Williams, I have 2 young children at home. My son is 9 and my daughter is 5. I can't just leave them alone." "I understand your dilemma, Miss Martinez, but your mother's condition is quite serious. She may not have much time." The doctor's voice took on an even more urgent tone. "Is there anyone who could watch your children? A neighbor, perhaps, or a family member? Your mother is really asking for you specifically, and I think seeing you would provide enormous comfort in what might be her final hours." The words "final hours" hit Elena like a physical blow. Despite their occasional disagreements, her mother was one of the most important people in her life, the woman who had helped her through the difficult early years of single motherhood, and who remained a constant source of support and advice. The thought of her mother dying alone, asking for her daughter who couldn't come, was unbearable. I need to think. Can I call you back in just a few minutes?" Miss Martinez, I really don't think we have much time to waste. Your mother's vital signs are stable for now, but with injuries like these, things can change very quickly. I've seen cases where family members waited too long and then regretted it for the rest of their lives. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. Through the kitchen doorway, she watched Danny patiently helping Lily stack blocks again, his gentle guidance and protective presence reminding her why she couldn't simply abandon her children. But the urgency in the doctor's voice, the image of her mother lying injured and alone, made staying home feel equally impossible. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, I'll come, but I can only stay for a little while. My children ... double quotes, I understand completely, Miss Martinez. Just get here as quickly as you can. Your mother will be so relieved to see you." Elena hung up the phone with trembling hands, staring at it for a moment as if it might ring again with news that this was all a mistake, that her mother was fine and this nightmare was over. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the continued sounds of her children playing in the next room. She walked back to the living room on unsteady legs, watching Danny and Lily rebuild their castle with the focused determination of children who believed that anything broken could be fixed with enough patience and care. The sight of their innocence, their complete trust that their mother would protect them from all harm, made what she had to do feel even more difficult. "Danny, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important." He looked up immediately, his young face already showing concern at her serious tone. Even at 9, he had learned to read her moods with uncanny accuracy, to sense when adult problems were intruding on their family stability. That was a doctor from the hospital. "Grandma has been in a car accident and she's asking for me. I need to go see her right away." Danny's face went pale. Despite being only 9, he understood the gravity of hospital calls and emergency situations. "Is Grandma going to be okay?" "I don't know yet, honey. That's why I need to go see her. But here's the thing. I need you to be the man of the house while I'm gone. Can you do that for me?" Danny straightened his shoulders, the weight of responsibility settling on him once again. "How long will you be gone?" "Just an hour, maybe 2 at the most. I just need to see that she's okay and let her know I'm here. Then I'll come straight home." Elena knelt down in front of him, taking his hands in hers. "I need you to watch Lily. Keep the doors locked and don't let anyone in the house. Can you promise me that?" "I promise, Mom. I'll take good care of Lily." Lily looked up from her blocks, confusion evident in her bright blue eyes. "Why can't we come with you, Mommy?" Elena's heart ached as she explained. "Hospitals aren't good places for little girls, sweetheart. They're full of sick people and loud noises. You'll be much happier here with Danny, and I'll be back before you know it." She gathered her purse and car keys with hurried efficiency, checking to make sure her phone was charged and that she had her driver's license and insurance cards. The normal routines of leaving the house felt surreal given the emergency, but she forced herself to think practically about what she might need at the hospital. "Danny, if anything happens, anything at all, you call my cell phone immediately. And if there's a real emergency, you call 911. Do you remember our address?" 1247 Maple Street, Riverside, California, Danny recited solemnly. "Good boy. And remember, don't open the door for anyone. I don't care who they say they are or what they want. You keep that door locked until I get home." Elena kissed both children goodbye, holding them perhaps a moment longer than usual, breathing in the familiar scent of Lily's strawberry shampoo and feeling the solid warmth of Danny's small body against hers. As she walked toward the front door, she turned back for one last look at her children. Danny had already positioned himself protectively next to Lily, his young face set with determination. "I love you both so much," she called out. I'll be back soon, I promise." The last thing she saw before closing the door was Danny helping Lily select the next block for their castle, his patient voice explaining architectural principles to his little sister. The image of their innocent concentration, their complete trust in her promise to return, would haunt her in the hours to come. As Elena's car pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down Maple Street, the Martinez house settled into an unusual quiet. Danny locked the front door carefully, checking the deadbolt twice before returning to the living room where Lily waited with expectant eyes. "Don't worry, Lily," he said, settling back down on the carpet beside her. "Mom will be back soon, and Grandma will be okay. Everything's going to be fine." But even as he spoke the reassuring words, Danny felt a strange uneasiness settling in his chest. Something about the morning felt different now, charged with an energy he couldn't identify. He shook off the feeling and focused on his sister, determined to be the protector their mother needed him to be. Outside, the sunny Saturday morning continued unchanged, birds singing in the oak trees that lined Maple Street, neighbors tending their gardens and washing their cars. But inside the Martinez house, two children waited alone, unaware that their peaceful world was about to be shattered by a danger they could never have imagined. 23 minutes had passed since Elena's hurried departure, and the Martinez house had settled into an artificial calm that felt more like the quiet before a storm than genuine peace. The morning sunlight continued to filter through the living room windows, casting familiar patterns across the worn carpet where Danny sat with Lily, methodically rebuilding their block castle. But something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere of their modest home. The comfortable rhythms of Saturday morning had been disrupted by their mother's emergency departure, leaving behind an unsettling vacuum of adult supervision that made every ordinary sound seem amplified and potentially threatening. Danny found himself constantly glancing toward the front windows, his young mind cataloging every car that passed on Maple Street, every distant laugh from neighboring children, every slam of a screen door or bark of a neighborhood dog. The responsibility of protecting his little sister weighed heavily on his 9-year-old shoulders, made more acute by the unusual circumstances of their solitude. Elena had never left them alone for more than a few minutes, and the prospect of potentially hours without adult supervision felt overwhelming, especially when shadowed by the uncertainty surrounding their grandmother's condition. Despite his attempts to remain calm and focused, Danny could feel anxiety building in his chest, like a physical weight. His hands moved automatically, helping Lily arrange blocks and plastic animals around their reconstructed castle, but his attention remained divided between the immediate task of keeping his sister happy and the larger responsibility of maintaining their safety until Elena's return. Every few minutes, he found himself listening for the sound of their mother's car in the driveway, hoping for the relief of her early return. Lily seemed blissfully unaware of any tension, humming softly to herself as she arranged plastic horses around the base of their castle with a focused concentration that characterized all of her play. Her golden curls caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the living room windows, creating a halo effect that emphasized her ethereal beauty. At 5 years old, she possessed the kind of angelic appearance that made strangers stop and comment, bright blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and mischief, delicate features that would undoubtedly develop into striking beauty as she matured, and an innocent radiance that seemed to light up any room she entered. She wore her favorite purple dress with tiny butterflies scattered across the fabric, the same dress she had begged to wear 3 days in a row until Elena had finally agreed to wash it overnight so it would be clean for Saturday morning play. The fabric was slightly wrinkled from her enthusiastic movements, and the hem bore the faint stains of yesterday's juice box incident, but to Lily it remained the most beautiful garment in the world. Her small feet were bare, toenails painted, a bright pink that she had begged Elena to apply the night before during their weekly pedicure ritual. Danny, "Do you think the horses need a bridge to get to the castle?" she asked, holding up a long rectangular block with the serious consideration of an architect contemplating a major structural decision. "They might get their feet wet if they have to walk through the water." "That's a really good idea, Lily," Danny replied, though his voice carried a distracted quality that his sister was too young to notice. "Bridges are important for defense, too. If there's only one way in, it's easier to protect the castle from enemies." Even in play, Danny's mind worked in terms of protection and security, concepts that had become second nature to him through 3 years of functioning as the unofficial man of the house. His father's departure when Danny was 6 had thrust him into a role he had never asked for but had accepted with the solemn determination that characterized his approach to all of life's challenges. He had learned to think strategically, to anticipate problems, to position himself as a barrier between his family and potential threats. He helped Lily position the bridge block, carefully adjusting its angle to ensure it would support the weight of her plastic horses, but his ears remained tuned to the sounds of the neighborhood. The familiar rhythms of Saturday afternoon life continued around them, the distant hum of lawnmowers as neighbors tackled weekend yard work, children playing in the street 3 houses down, their laughter carrying on the warm air, the occasional car passing by with music drifting from open windows. These were the sounds of normalcy, of safety, of a world where the most serious concern was whether the grass needed cutting, or which restaurant to visit for lunch. The television murmured quietly in the background, tuned to a cartoon channel that usually captivated Lily's attention completely. Animated characters chased each other across the screen in bright colors and exaggerated movements, their adventures unfolding in a world where problems were simple and solutions always arrived within 30 minutes. Today, however, Lily seemed more interested in their building project, perhaps sensing through some mysterious sibling intuition that Danny needed the comfort of her presence and attention. Danny appreciated the distraction of their shared activity. It kept his sister occupied and content, while he struggled with the vague sense of unease that had settled over him since their mother's departure. The feeling was difficult to articulate, not quite fear, but something approaching it. A hypervigilance that made him aware of every shadow that passed across their windows, every creak of the house settling on its foundation, every shift in the quality of light as clouds moved across the sun. Perhaps it was the way the phone call had interrupted their perfect morning, shattering the peaceful domestic routine they had been enjoying. Or perhaps it was the unusual stress in his mother's voice as she explained about their grandmother's accident, a tremor of panic that Danny had rarely heard from the woman who had always seemed unshakably strong and capable. Elena had been genuinely frightened, more shaken than Danny had seen her in months, and her hasty departure had left him feeling responsible not just for Lily's immediate safety, but for maintaining the stability of their small family unit during a crisis he didn't fully understand. The emotional weight of that responsibility felt enormous for someone who still lost teeth and needed help reaching items on high shelves. Danny found himself wondering what his father would do in this situation, though those memories were increasingly dim and complicated by emotions he wasn't old enough to fully process. His father had been physically strong and imposing, but he had also been unpredictable and sometimes frightening. Danny wasn't sure he wanted to emulate those qualities, even if they might prove useful in protecting his family. The doorbell's sudden, insistent chiming shattered the afternoon quiet like glass breaking against concrete. The sound cut through the peaceful atmosphere of their living room with startling violence, causing Danny's head to snap up immediately and his body to tense with an instinctive wariness that he couldn't quite explain. Lily looked up from her blocks with mild curiosity, but Danny felt something much deeper and more troubling, an immediate sense that this interruption represented a threat to their safety. The sound wasn't the casual, friendly ring of a neighbor. stopping by to borrow a cup of sugar or to chat about weekend plans. It wasn't the brief, polite chime of a delivery person dropping off a package. This was urgent, demanding, almost aggressive in its persistence. The doorbell rang again before the echo of the first chime had fully faded, creating a rhythm that suggested impatience and determination rather than courtesy. "Someone's at the door," Lily announced unnecessarily, scrambling to her feet with the excited energy that children always displayed when routine was interrupted by unexpected visitors. Her blue eyes sparkled with anticipation, and she began moving toward the front of the house with the fearless curiosity of someone who had never encountered real danger. "Stay here, Lily," Danny instructed firmly, rising from the carpet with careful deliberation and positioning himself between his sister and the front door. "Mom said not to open the door for anyone, remember? She was very specific about that." The doorbell rang again, longer this time, the electronic chime stretching out in a way that felt almost like a demand. It was followed by 3 sharp knocks that echoed through the house with authority, each impact against the wooden door carrying a force that seemed excessive for a simple request for attention. The knocking had a quality that suggested someone accustomed to having doors opened immediately upon their arrival, someone who didn't expect to be kept waiting by anything. As insignificant as a 9-year-old's hesitation, Danny approached the front door cautiously, his bare feet silent on the Fatawan Salam hardwood floor. Each step felt weighted with significance, as if he were crossing into territory where his childhood innocence might not be sufficient protection. The heavy wooden door, painted a cheerful blue that Elena had chosen specifically to brighten their modest home's exterior and make it more welcoming, suddenly felt like the only barrier between his family and an unknown threat that he couldn't yet identify but instinctively feared. The house around him seemed to hold its breath as he approached. The peephole. Family photographs watched from their frames on the hallway walls. Pictures of birthday parties celebrated on tight budgets. Holiday mornings where joy mattered more than expensive gifts. Countless candid moments that captured the genuine love that bound the 3 of them together despite their struggles. These images of their life together seemed to whisper encouragement, reminding Danny that he was not just protecting himself and Lily, but preserving the happiness they had built as a family. Standing on his tiptoes, Danny pressed his eye to the peephole, adjusting his position until he could see clearly onto their small front porch. The fisheye lens distorted the image slightly, but what he saw made his stomach clench with immediate and powerful anxiety. A tall man stood waiting, and everything about his appearance set off alarm bells in Danny's young mind. The stranger was impeccably dressed in an expensive-looking navy blue suit that seemed far too formal for a casual Saturday afternoon visit to a modest neighborhood home. The fabric appeared to be high-quality wool, perfectly tailored to his lean frame, and his shoes were polished leather that reflected the afternoon sunlight. His dark hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place despite what must have been a drive to reach their address. His posture radiated confidence and command, the bearing of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted without question or delay, but it was the man's eyes that truly alarmed Danny. Even through the distortion of the peephole, they appeared cold and calculating, scanning their neighborhood with predatory awareness rather than the casual interest of a family friend. The stranger's gaze moved systematically from house to house, noting which driveways were empty, which windows showed signs of activity, which neighbors might be outside to observe his presence. This wasn't the behavior of someone making a social call. This was reconnaissance. The man appeared to be in his late 30s, with sharp, angular features that might have been handsome in a conventional sense, but carried an underlying hardness that suggested cruelty lurking beneath the surface. His mouth was set in what was probably intended to be a friendly smile, but the expression didn't reach his eyes, creating a disconnect that Danny found deeply unsettling. There was something practiced about the smile, as if it were a tool he employed when necessary rather than a genuine expression of warmth or happiness. He carried himself with a kind of polished confidence that came from wealth and privilege, but there was something artificial about his entire presentation, as if his appearance had been carefully constructed to project a specific image designed to disarm and reassure potential victims. His expensive watch caught the light as he checked the time with obvious impatience, and Danny noticed that his hands were soft and well manicured, not the hands of someone who worked with them, but the hands of someone who used other tools to get what he wanted. Danny's heart began beating faster as he watched the stranger glance around the street with calculating intensity. The man's behavior suggested someone conducting a careful assessment of potential witnesses or escape routes, someone planning for contingencies that went far beyond a simple social visit. Everything about his demeanor indicated a person accustomed to getting what he wanted through charm, manipulation, or force, depending on what the situation required. The doorbell rang a third time, accompanied by more knocking, and Danny heard the man's voice for the first time. It was smooth and authoritative, carrying the kind of practiced charm that Danny had learned to distrust from watching his mother interact with men who seemed too eager to please. Beneath the friendly facade was an undercurrent of impatience and entitlement that made Danny's skin crawl with instinctive revulsion. "Hello? Is anyone home? It's James, your mother's friend." Danny's blood turned to ice at the introduction. This was James Richardson, the man his mother had been dating for 2 months, the one she had mentioned wanting them to meet, the mysterious boyfriend who represented Elena's hope for companionship and perhaps a father figure for her children. But everything about his presence here, now, when their mother was dealing with a family emergency at the hospital, felt fundamentally wrong. The timing was impossible to explain in an innocent way. Elena had received the emergency call less than 30 minutes ago and had left immediately without talking to anyone else. How had James learned about the situation? Why had he come to their house instead of going to the hospital to support Elena during her crisis? And most troubling of all, why hadn't Elena mentioned that James might be coming over? "Danny, who is it?" Lily called from the living room, her voice bright with curiosity and completely innocent of any sense of danger. It's Mom's friend." Danny replied carefully, his voice barely above a whisper. "But Mom didn't say he was coming." The admission felt like confessing to a failure of some kind. Elena had trusted him to keep them safe, and now he was faced with a situation that his limited experience hadn't prepared him to handle. How was a 9-year-old supposed to determine whether an adult was trustworthy? How could he distinguish between legitimate help and a threat disguised as assistance? James must have heard voices inside, because he knocked again, more insistently this time, the sound echoing through their modest home with demanding authority. "Hi there. I know you're in there. I'm James Richardson, your mom's boyfriend. She asked me to come check on you kids." Danny's protective instincts flared immediately at the claim. Elena had left less than 30 minutes ago in response to an emergency call about her mother. When would she have had time to contact James and arrange for him to check on them? The timeline didn't make sense, and Danny had learned through hard experience to pay attention when adult stories contained inconsistencies or logical gaps. Moreover, Elena had been very specific about her instructions before leaving. She had told Danny to keep the doors locked and not to let anyone into the house, regardless of who they claimed to be or what they said they wanted. She had emphasized the importance of these rules and had made Danny promise to follow them exactly. Now, barely 30 minutes later, she supposedly wanted him to ignore those instructions and open the door for someone she had never mentioned might be coming? The contradiction felt like a test of some kind, and Danny's instincts screamed that the wrong choice could have catastrophic consequences for his family. He pressed his eye to the peephole again, studying James's face more carefully. The man's expression remained friendly and patient, but there was something predatory in his eyes as he waited for a response. He stood slightly too close to the door, positioned in a way that would allow him to push inside the moment it opened. With trembling fingers, Danny reached for the deadbolt and turned it to ensure it was locked, the metallic click seeming unnaturally loud in the quiet house. The sound felt final and irrevocable, a declaration that he had chosen to trust his mother's explicit instructions over this stranger's claims. Then he checked the chain lock as well, sliding it into place with hands that shook despite his determination. To remain calm, James must have heard the locks engaging, because his demeanor shifted subtly. The friendly smile remained in place, but his voice carried a sharper edge when he spoke again. "I can hear you in there, kids. Come on, open up. Your mom sent me to get you. There's been a change in plans about your grandmother." The mention of their grandmother felt like a punch to Danny's stomach. How did James know about the hospital emergency? Elena had only learned about the supposed accident 20 minutes ago when she received the phone call. She had left immediately afterward, without speaking to anyone else, without making any calls or sending any messages. The only way James could know about their grandmother's situation was if he had somehow known about it before Elena did. The implications of that realization filled Danny with cold terror. If James had known about the emergency call before it happened, then he must have been involved in creating it somehow. The hospital call that had seemed so urgent and legitimate might have been a trap designed to get Elena away from her children, leaving them vulnerable and alone. "Danny!" Lily had appeared beside him, tugging on his arm with excited energy. "It's Mommy's friend. The one she wanted us to meet. Can we open the door now?" "No, Lily," Danny said firmly, gently but decisively moving his sister away from the door and positioning himself between her and the potential threat outside. "Mom said not to open the door for anyone. She was very clear about that. We have to wait until she comes back." Lily's face fell with disappointment, but she didn't argue. At 5 years old, she had learned to trust Danny's judgment in situations where their mother wasn't present. He had never steered her wrong before, and his serious tone convinced her that this was important even if she didn't understand why. James's voice came through the door again, and this time Danny could detect a subtle change in tone, still friendly and reassuring on the surface, but with an undercurrent of urgency that didn't match his casual words. There was something almost desperate in the way he pressed his case, as if time were running out for whatever plan he was trying to execute. "Hey kids, I know your mom told you not to open doors for strangers, but I'm not a stranger. I'm James, remember? Your mom has told you about me, hasn't she? She's talked about wanting us all to meet and become a family." The words struck Danny as manipulative rather than reassuring. Yes, Elena had mentioned James, but she had also been very specific about when and how they would meet him. She had wanted the first meeting to be on her terms, in her presence, when she could control the situation and ensure everyone's comfort. She would never have arranged for them to meet James alone, especially during a family crisis. Danny's mind raced as he tried to process the situation. Everything about James's story felt wrong, like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit together. The timing was impossible, the logistics didn't make sense, and his mother's careful personality made it inconceivable that she would suddenly change her mind about such important safety protocols without calling to explain the situation personally. "Listen, kids, there's been a development with your grandmother's situation. Your mom asked me to come get you and bring you to the hospital. She needs both of you there right away." Lily's eyes widened with concern at this news, her small hand finding Danny's and gripping it tightly. Is Grandma getting sicker, Danny? Does Mommy need us to help? Danny felt his heart breaking at the worry in his sister's voice. At 5 years old, Lily had a limited understanding of death and serious illness, but she could sense the gravity of adult emergencies and wanted desperately to help in any way she could. Her loving, generous heart made her vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation that James was attempting. James must have heard Lily's concerned question through the door, because his response came immediately, his voice taking on a tone of practiced sympathy that sounded rehearsed rather than genuine. I'm afraid so, sweetheart. Your mom is really upset and crying, and she needs her babies with her. That's why she called me. She knew I could get here quickly and bring you to her safely. The explanation sounded reasonable on the surface, but Danny's suspicions continued to multiply. If Elena was truly distraught and needed her children with her, why hadn't she called them directly to explain the situation? Why send someone else to collect them instead of coming back to get them herself? Elena was a registered nurse who understood hospital protocols. She would know that children were often restricted from certain areas of hospitals, especially intensive care units where critical patients were treated. Can you call Mom and let US talk to her? Danny called through the door, his voice stronger than he felt. We want to hear from her that it's okay to come with you. There was a brief pause before James answered, and in that silence Danny thought he detected a flash of irritation breaking through the carefully maintained facade of concern. When James spoke again, his voice carried a slight edge that suggested his patience was beginning to wear thin. Your mom is in with the doctors right now, buddy. She can't come to the phone. That's why she asked me to handle this situation for her. She trusts me to take care of you kids, and she's counting on me to bring you to the hospital safely. The explanation sounded rehearsed, like something James had prepared in advance to address exactly this kind of question. But it still didn't address Danny's fundamental concerns about the situation. Even if Elena couldn't come to the phone immediately, she could have sent a text message or asked a nurse to call on her behalf. She could have provided some form of verification that would prove James was acting on her instructions. I think we should wait for Mom to call us herself, Danny said finally, his young voice carrying a firmness that surprised even himself. She always calls to check on us when she's going to be away longer than planned. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long, and when James spoke again, Danny could hear that his mask of patience was beginning to slip. The friendly, understanding tone was being replaced by something harder and more demanding, revealing glimpses of the real personality beneath the carefully constructed facade. Danny, is it? Listen, son, we don't have time for this kind of hesitation. Your grandmother is in serious condition, and your mother needs you at the hospital. Now? Not in an hour when you feel comfortable about it, not when you've had time to think it over now. Every minute we waste here is another minute your mom spends worrying about whether you're going to show up to support her. The words were designed to create guilt and urgency, to make Danny feel responsible for causing additional pain to his already distraught mother. It was exactly the kind of emotional manipulation that adults sometimes used on children who were too young to recognize the tactics but old enough to feel the intended shame and pressure. Lily pressed closer to Danny, sensing the tension in his posture even if she didn't understand its source. Danny, maybe we should go help Mommy, she whispered, her blue eyes wide with worry and confusion. If Grandma is really sick, Mommy might need us to make her feel better. Danny felt his heart aching at his sister's innocent desire to help their family during a crisis. At 5 years old, Lily believed that love and good intentions could solve any problem, that her presence alone could provide comfort to the adults she cared about. She didn't understand that sometimes the most loving thing children could do was to follow safety rules, even when those rules prevented them from doing what felt emotionally right. No, Lily, Danny said firmly, though his heart ached at the uncertainty in his sister's voice. Mom gave us very specific instructions, and she trusted us to follow them. She said to wait here and keep the doors locked, and that's what we're going to do." James's voice came through the door again, and this time the friendly mask was slipping noticeably. The careful veneer of concern was being replaced by irritation and impatience, revealing glimpses of a personality that was far less pleasant than the charming boyfriend Elena had described. "Kids, I'm trying to be patient here, but this is a real emergency situation. Your mother is counting on me to bring you to her, and I'm not going to let her down. She trusts me to take care of her most precious possessions. That's you two. And I take that responsibility very seriously. Now open this door." The commanding tone sent a chill down Danny's spine. This wasn't how adults spoke to children when they were genuinely trying to help or comfort them during a crisis. This was how they spoke when they expected immediate obedience without question, when they considered children's concerns and feelings to be irrelevant obstacles rather than valid expressions of uncertainty or fear. Danny had heard this tone before. In the months before his father left their family, it always preceded situations that made his mother cry, confrontations that left everyone feeling worse rather than better. It was the voice of someone who used authority and intimidation to get what they wanted, regardless of whether their demands were reasonable or their intentions were good. "We're not opening the door," Danny called out, his voice wavering slightly but his resolve firm. "You can call Mom and have her tell us herself that it's okay to come with you." What happened next confirmed every one of Danny's fears and validated every instinct that had warned him against trusting this stranger. Instead of the understanding response of an adult who genuinely wanted to help children during a family crisis, James's reaction was immediate frustration and barely contained anger. "Listen, you little brat, I don't have time for games. Your mother sent me here to get you, and that's exactly what's going to happen. I've been patient enough with your childish nonsense, but my patience has limits. Now open this door before I decide to open it myself." The threat was unmistakable, and Danny felt his protective instincts surge with desperate intensity. Whatever James's real intentions were, they clearly had nothing to do with helping their family or responding to a medical emergency. The veneer of concern and friendship had been completely stripped away, revealing something predatory and dangerous underneath. Danny grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her away from the front door, his mind racing as he tried to think of what to do next. Their modest house suddenly felt like a trap rather than a sanctuary, with too many windows and doors that could potentially be breached by someone determined to get inside. "Lily, we need to go to your room right now," he whispered urgently, trying to keep his voice calm despite the terror building in his chest. "But Danny, what about Grandma? What about Mommy?" Lily's voice was beginning to carry the high-pitched tension that preceded tears. She could sense Danny's fear now, and it was affecting her own emotional state in the way that often happened between siblings who were close. Before Danny could answer, they heard the sound of James testing the door handle, the metal rattling against the locked mechanism with increasing force. The sound was aggressive and determined, far removed from the polite behavior of someone who respected their family's privacy and safety. Then came a more concerning sound, the scrape of something metallic against the door frame, as if James was examining the locks or looking for a way to bypass them. "Kids, I know you're scared, but you're making this much harder than it needs to be," James called through the door, his voice now carrying an edge of barely controlled anger that made Danny's skin crawl with fear. "I'm trying to help you here, but my patience is running out. You can either cooperate with me voluntarily, or I can make this more difficult for everyone involved." Danny's heart pounded as he realized that James wasn't going to simply give up and leave when his manipulation tactics failed. Whatever he wanted from their family, he was prepared to escalate the situation to get it, even if that meant frightening children or damaging property. The realization that they were dealing with someone truly dangerous, someone willing to use force against children, filled Danny with a terror unlike anything he had ever experienced. His mind raced as he tried to remember details about their house's security. Elena always kept the back door locked, but Danny couldn't remember if she had checked it specifically before leaving in her hurried state. The thought of James circling around to the rear of the house while they remained trapped in the living room filled Danny with panic. Their neighborhood was quiet on Saturday afternoons, with many families away running errands or attending children's activities. If James decided to break in, there might not be anyone close enough to hear them scream for help. The windows were another concern. Most of them had screens but no additional security measures, and several were large enough for an adult to climb through if the screens were removed. Danny tried to remember which windows were visible from neighboring houses and which were hidden by trees or fencing that could provide cover for someone attempting to break in. "Lily, we're going to play a game," Danny said, forcing his voice to remain calm despite the terror building in his chest. "We're going to go to your room and hide. And we're going to be very, very quiet until Mom comes home." Lily's eyes were wide with confusion and growing fear. At 5 years old, she couldn't fully understand the danger they were facing, but she could sense Danny's panic, and it was beginning to affect her own emotional state. The afternoon that had started with such promise and joy was turning into a nightmare that neither of them had the experience to navigate safely. "I don't want to play hiding games, Danny. I want Mommy to come home right now. I want the scary man to go away." "I know, sweetheart. I want Mommy too. But we have to be brave right now, okay? We have to take care of each other until she comes back, just like she asked us to." The sound of James moving around their front porch was clearly audible now. Heavy footsteps on the wooden boards, the scrape of something against the side of the house, the rattle of windows being tested. Danny realized with growing horror that James was indeed looking for alternative ways into their home, conducting a systematic search for vulnerabilities that he could exploit. "Kids, I can hear you talking in there. This is your last chance to open this door voluntarily. After that, I'm coming in whether you want me to or not, and I promise you that you won't like how that plays out." The naked threat in James's voice galvanized Danny into action. Any remaining doubt about the stranger's intentions evaporated in the face of such explicit menace. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a communication problem. This was a predator who had targeted their family and was now prepared to use whatever force was necessary to achieve his goals. Danny grabbed Lily's hand and began pulling her toward the hallway that led to their bedrooms, his mind racing as he tried to think of escape plans or hiding places. But their modest house offered few options for concealment, and Danny knew that if James truly intended to break in, two children would have little chance of stopping him through evasion alone. As they reached the hallway, the sound they both dreaded echoed through the house, a tremendous crash as James's shoulder hit their front door with violent force. The impact was so powerful that it seemed to shake the entire house, rattling windows and causing family photographs to tremble on their hooks. The door held, but Danny could hear the wood frame groaning under the impact, could see dust falling from the ceiling where the force had stressed the structural connections. James was no longer pretending to be a concerned family friend or a helpful boyfriend responding to an emergency. He was revealing himself as exactly what Danny's instincts had warned him about, a predator who had come for his sister, someone willing to use violence against children to achieve his twisted goals. "Run, Lily!" Danny screamed, his young voice cracking with terror and determination. "Run to your room and lock the door." But even as the words left his mouth, Danny knew that bedroom doors with simple push-button locks wouldn't stop someone determined to break them down. James had abandoned all pretense now, and the sound of his continued assault on their front door filled the house with the terrifying rhythm of impending disaster. Another Tremendous crash shook the house as James threw his full weight against their front door. This time, Danny heard the ominous sound of wood beginning to splinter, saw the door frame actually shift slightly in its housing. Their modest home security measures, designed to deter casual burglars rather than determined predators, were proving inadequate against someone willing to use significant force. In that moment, as he heard their front door beginning to fail under James's violent assault, Danny made the most important decision of his young life. He wouldn't hide in a bedroom hoping to avoid confrontation. He wouldn't run out the back door and abandon his sister to face this monster alone. He would stand and fight to protect Lily, no matter what it cost him. The boy who had spent 3 years learning to be responsible, to be mature, to be the protector of his family, was about to face the ultimate test of his courage. And somewhere deep in his 9-year-old heart, Danny Martinez knew that he would rather die than let anyone hurt his little sister. With a final, explosive crash, the front door burst open, the wood frame splintering around the locks as James Richardson stepped into their home with the cold determination of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Sunlight streamed through the destroyed doorway, creating an ominous silhouette as James surveyed the interior of their house with calculating eyes. But what he found waiting for him wasn't 2 helpless children cowering in fear. Instead, he discovered a young boy who had already decided that some things were worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds. Danny Martinez stood in the hallway leading to the bedrooms, his small body positioned protectively between the intruder and his sister. His young face set with a determination that would have been impressive in an adult and was nothing short of extraordinary in a 9-year-old child. The battle for Lily's life was about to begin, and Danny was ready to give everything he had to protect the most important person in his world. The destruction of the front door seemed to happen in slow motion, each splintering crack of wood echoing through the Martinez house like gunshots. Danny watched in horrified fascination as the cheerful blue door that had welcomed them home countless times exploded inward, taking with it the last barrier between his family and the monster who had been stalking them. Fragments of wood scattered across the hardwood floor, and the afternoon sunlight streamed through the destroyed doorway, creating an ominous silhouette as James Richardson stepped into their home with predatory confidence. For a split second, the house fell into an eerie silence. James stood framed in the ruined doorway, his expensive suit somehow still immaculate despite the violence he had just committed. His dark hair remained perfectly styled, and his cold eyes surveyed the interior of their modest home with the calculating gaze of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. The charming mask he had worn during his courtship of Elena was completely gone now, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous and honest about his true intentions. Danny felt time compress around him as he stared at the man who represented everything evil in the world. At 9 years old, he had never encountered pure malevolence before, had never been forced to confront someone who viewed him and his sister not as human beings deserving of protection and love, but as obstacles and prizes in some twisted game. The realization that such people existed, that they could infiltrate his family's life through deception and manipulation, shattered something fundamental in Danny's understanding of the world. Behind him, Lily's terrified whimper cut through the silence like a knife. She stood frozen in the hallway, her bright blue eyes wide with incomprehension and terror, her small hands clutched around her favorite stuffed rabbit as if it could provide protection against the nightmare that had just invaded their home. At 5 years old, she couldn't fully grasp what was happening, but her instincts told her that the tall stranger who had destroyed their door represented a threat unlike anything she had ever encountered. "Well, well," James said softly, his voice carrying a tone of satisfaction that made Danny's skin crawl. "That was more difficult than it needed to be, children. But we're past all that unpleasantness now. He stepped fully into their living room, glass crunching under his polished shoes as he moved with the confident stride of someone who believed he had already won. The destruction he had caused was more than just physical. The violated doorway represented the shattering of their family's sense of security, the brutal invasion of the sanctuary that Elena had worked so hard to create for her children. Family photographs watched from their frames like silent witnesses to the destruction of everything the Martinez family held sacred: their privacy, their safety, their belief that love could protect them from the darkness that existed in the world. Danny's mind raced as he tried to process the impossible situation unfolding before him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab Lily's hand and flee through the back door into the neighborhood where surely someone would help them. But a deeper understanding, born from 3 years of being the protector of his family, told him that running would only delay the inevitable. James had planned this carefully, had orchestrated Elena's removal from the house with surgical precision. He wouldn't have come this far only to be thwarted by 2 children's escape attempt. Now then, James continued, brushing imaginary dust from his suit jacket with movements that seemed almost casual, as if breaking into homes was a routine part of his Saturday afternoon activities. Let's discuss what happens next. I need the little princes there to come with me quietly and calmly. No screaming, no struggling, no dramatic scenes that might attract unwanted attention from the neighbors. The casual way he referred to Lily as the little princess while discussing kidnapping her made Danny's stomach turn with revulsion. There was something obscene about the endearment when spoken by someone who viewed his sister as merchandise
rather than a human being.
The tone suggested familiarity and ownership that James had no right to claim, as if he had already decided that Lily belonged to him. "You're not taking her anywhere," Danny said, his young voice carrying a firmness that surprised even himself. He stepped forward, positioning himself more directly between James and his sister, his small body serving as the only barrier between the predator and his intended victim. "She's not going with you." James's laugh was soft and genuinely amused, as if Danny had just told a particularly entertaining joke. "Oh, little man, you really don't understand the situation you're in, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a democratic process where everyone gets a vote. This is me taking what I came for, and you can either step aside voluntarily or learn some very painful lessons about the difference between children and adults." The threat was delivered with such casual confidence that it carried more menace than screaming rage would have. James spoke as if violence against children was simply another tool in his arsenal, no different from the charm and manipulation he had used to deceive Elena. Danny realized with growing horror that they were dealing with someone who viewed the suffering of others as merely the cost of doing business. "Lily, run!" Danny screamed over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off James. "Run to your room and lock the door. Call 911. But Lily remained frozen in the hallway, paralyzed by fear and confusion. At 5 years old, she had never been taught to expect that adults might hurt children, had never been prepared for a situation where the normal rules of safety and protection didn't apply. Her world had always been populated by people who loved her and wanted to keep her safe, and the concept of an adult who might wish her harm was beyond her ability to process quickly. James began moving toward them with deliberate steps, his movements controlled and purposeful. He wasn't rushing or showing any signs of panic despite having just committed a violent break-in. The calculated nature of his approach suggested extensive planning and preparation, as if he had rehearsed this scenario multiple times in his mind. "You know, Danny," James said conversationally as he advanced, "your mother talked about you quite a bit during our dates. She was very proud of how mature and responsible you are, how you take care of your little sister when she's at work." She had no idea she was describing exactly the kind of obstacle I might encounter today. The casual reference to Elena and their family conversations felt like a violation, almost as profound as the physical break-in. Danny realized that every moment of their mother's happiness during her relationship with James had been built on lies and manipulation. Every smile Elena had shared when talking about her children, every story she had told about their family life, had been information that James was gathering for this moment. She also mentioned how protective you are of Lily, James continued, now close enough that Danny could see the cold calculation in his eyes. How you've appointed yourself as her guardian and protector. It's really quite touching, in a pathetic sort of way. But here's what your mother didn't understand and what you're about to learn. Good intentions don't matter when you're dealing with someone who has real power. Danny's heart hammered against his ribs as James drew closer, but he held his ground. Every fiber of his being wanted to flee, to find an adult who could handle this situation, to escape from the responsibility of protecting his sister against impossible odds. But there were no adults coming to help them, no cavalry riding to their rescue. There was only a 9-year-old boy and his determination to protect the most important person in his world. I'm not moving, Danny said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. You'll have to go through me to get to her. James stopped directly in front of Danny, towering over the small boy with his adult height and weight advantage. The physical disparity between them was comical in its extremes, a fully grown man in an expensive suit facing off against a 9-year-old child in Saturday morning play clothes. But there was nothing humorous about the situation, nothing amusing about the Predator's confident smile as he looked down at his young opponent. Go through you? James repeated thoughtfully, as if considering the phrase carefully. That's exactly what I'm going to do, little hero. The question is whether you want to make this easy on yourself or whether you prefer to learn about consequences the hard way. Without warning, James's hand shot out toward Lily, his movements suddenly explosive after his previous calculated restraint. But Danny had been watching for exactly this kind of attack, his young mind operating on pure instinct and adrenaline. He threw himself forward, wrapping his arms around James's legs with all the strength his small body could muster. The impact sent a shock of pain through Danny's shoulders and arms, but he held on with desperate determination. James stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the boy's sudden movement and the surprising force of his attack. For a moment, the Predator's confident composure faltered as he struggled to maintain his balance. Get off me, you little pest. James snarled, his polished facade finally cracking to reveal the rage and frustration beneath. His voice carried a viciousness that he had kept carefully hidden during his months of deception, a quality that made it clear why he had been so successful at manipulating Elena's trusting nature. Danny clung to James's legs like his life depended on it, which in many ways it did. He could feel the powerful muscles beneath the expensive fabric of James's suit, could sense the man's superior strength and the violence he was capable of inflicting. But Danny also understood that every second he could delay James was another moment for Lily to escape, another opportunity for help to arrive, another chance for their mother to return home. Lily, run now! Danny screamed again, his voice muffled against James's legs but still audible throughout the house. Get out of the house! Go to the neighbors! This time, his sister's paralysis broke. Lily turned and ran toward the back of the house, her small feet pounding against the hardwood floor as she fled toward the kitchen and the rear exit. Her terrified sobs echoed through the house, but the sound of her movement filled Danny with fierce pride and determination. If she could just reach the back door, if she could make it to a neighbor's house, she would be safe. James's reaction to Lily's escape attempt was immediate and violent. His carefully controlled demeanor shattered completely as he realized his primary objective was slipping away. No, he roared, his voice filled with rage and desperation. "You're not ruining this for me, you little brat." The first blow caught Danny completely by surprise. James's fist connected with the side of his head with brutal force, sending explosions of light across his vision and nearly loosening his grip. The pain was unlike anything Danny had ever experienced, not the accidental bumps and scrapes of childhood play, but deliberate violence designed to cause maximum damage and intimidation. But instead of releasing his hold, Danny tightened his grip around James's legs. The pain clarified his purpose rather than defeating it, reminding him exactly what was at stake in this struggle. Lily's safety was worth any amount of physical suffering he might have to endure. I said, "Get off me." James roared, bringing his fist down again, this time catching Danny squarely in the nose. The cartilage crunched with a sickening sound, and blood immediately began streaming down Danny's face, staining his shirt and the floor beneath them. The pain was excruciating, bringing tears to his eyes and making it difficult to breathe through the damaged passages. But Danny held on. Through the haze of pain and the metallic taste of blood in his mouth, he could hear Lily's footsteps in the kitchen, could hear her struggling with the back door's locks. Every second he could buy her was precious. Every moment of delay increased her chances of escape. James delivered a vicious kick to Danny's ribs, his polished shoe connecting with bone and soft tissue with professional precision. The blow drove the air from Danny's lungs and sent shockwaves of agony through his small body, but still he refused to release his grip. His arms felt like they were being pulled from their sockets, and his vision blurred from the combination of pain and blood loss, but his determination never wavered. "Why wouldn't you just give up?" James demanded, punctuating each word with another blow. "This is pointless. You can't stop me. You're just making this harder on everyone." But Danny understood something that James didn't. This wasn't about winning, or losing in any conventional sense. This was about love, about family, about the bonds that made life worth living. James might be stronger, might be more experienced in violence, might ultimately succeed in his twisted goals. But Danny would never stop fighting to protect his sister, never surrender the responsibility that had been entrusted to him by the most important person in his world. "I won't let you hurt her," Danny gasped through broken teeth and streaming blood. "I won't let you take her." James's response was a renewed fury of violence. He grabbed Danny by the hair and yanked his head back, exposing his young face to a barrage of punches that split his lip and blackened his eye. Each blow was calculated to cause maximum pain and damage, delivered with the cold efficiency of someone who had hurt people before and knew exactly how to break their will to resist. Danny's left eye swelled shut almost immediately, his vision reduced to a narrow tunnel that made it difficult to track James's movements. Blood from his broken nose mixed with tears of pain and determination, creating a crimson mask across his young features. But through it all, he maintained his grip on James's legs, his small hands locked together with desperate strength. From the kitchen came the sound of the back door finally opening, followed by Lily's terrified screams echoing across their backyard. "Help! Help! Someone's hurting, Danny! Help us!" The sound of his sister's escape filled Danny with a surge of triumph that momentarily overwhelmed even the physical agony he was enduring. She had made it out of the house. She was safe. Whatever happened to him now, Lily would survive this nightmare. But James's reaction to Lily's escape was explosive rage that made his previous violence seem restrained by comparison. "You little bastard!" he screamed, abandoning any pretense of control. "You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" The beating that followed was savage and sustained. James rained blows down on Danny with mechanical precision, his fists connecting with the boy's head, face, and torso in a rhythm of violence that seemed to go on forever. Each impact sent fresh waves of agony through Danny's battered body, and he could feel his strength beginning to ebb as blood loss and trauma took their toll. But even as his vision darkened and his grip began to weaken, Danny could hear the voices of neighbors responding to Lily's screams. Adult voices, authoritative and concerned, were calling out across the yard. Someone was running toward their house. Help was coming. Let him go. The voice belonged to Mr. Rodriguez from 3 houses down, a retired police officer whose military bearing and commanding presence had always intimidated the neighborhood children. Step away from the boy now. James looked up from his assault, his face twisted with rage and frustration as he realized that his carefully planned operation had completely fallen apart. Lily had escaped and was now surrounded by neighbors who would protect her. Danny had delayed him long enough for help to arrive. And somewhere in the distance, the wail of sirens indicated that law enforcement was already responding to the emergency calls. This isn't over, James snarled down at Danny, his voice filled with venom and promised retribution. You have no idea who you're dealing with, what kind of people you've just crossed. But his threats carried no weight now. Danny could see the fear creeping into James's eyes as the reality of his situation became clear. He was trapped in a house surrounded by witnesses, caught in the act of assaulting a child, with police sirens growing louder by the moment. His careful planning had crumbled in the face of a 9-year-old's unexpected courage. James released Danny suddenly, allowing the battered boy to collapse to the floor in a heap of pain and exhaustion. Blood pooled beneath Danny's face as he struggled to remain conscious, his small body trembling with shock and adrenaline. Every breath sent fresh spikes of agony through his damaged ribs, and his swollen eye had closed completely, reducing his vision to a narrow, distorted window. But he was alive. More importantly, Lily was safe. The sound of her voice in the backyard, surrounded by protective neighbors, was the most beautiful music Danny had ever heard. He had succeeded in his most important mission, had protected his sister from a monster who would have destroyed her innocence and stolen her future. James stood over Danny's broken form for a moment, his chest heaving with exertion and rage. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained with Danny's blood, his perfectly styled hair disheveled from the struggle. The polished facade that had fooled Elena for 2 months was completely shattered, revealing the predator beneath. "You stupid, stubborn little fool," James muttered, his voice filled with contempt and frustration. "You have no idea what you've done. The plans that took months to arrange, the careful positioning, the perfect setup, all ruined by a 9-year-old brat who couldn't mind his own business." But even through his pain and exhaustion, Danny felt a surge of fierce pride at those words. Yes, he had ruined James's plans. Yes, he had interfered with whatever twisted scheme the predator had developed. And he would do it again, would endure any amount of suffering to protect his family from people like James Richardson. The sirens were very close now, their urgent wail filling the air with the promise of justice and safety. James looked around. The destroyed living room with the desperate calculation of someone searching for an escape route that no longer existed. The front door he had destroyed blocked any hope of a casual exit, and the backyard was now full of neighbors who would recognize him and could provide detailed descriptions to the police. In his panic, James made the critical error that would ultimately seal his fate. As he turned to flee through the shattered doorway, his cell phone slipped from his jacket pocket and clattered across the hardwood floor, coming to rest near Danny's outstretched hand. The device that contained months of surveillance photos, incriminating communications, and evidence of his criminal network had just been handed to law enforcement on a silver platter. Danny watched through his one functional eye as James disappeared through the ruined doorway, his footsteps echoing across the front porch as he fled into a neighborhood now filled with witnesses and approaching police cars. The predator who had seemed so confident and threatening just minutes before was now running like the coward. He had always been beneath his polished exterior. Mrs. Chen from next door was the first to reach Danny. Her elderly face creased with concern and horror at the sight of his injuries. She knelt beside him carefully, her gentle hands checking for serious damage while avoiding any movement that might cause additional pain. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Oh, you brave, brave boy. Help is coming. The ambulance is almost here. You're going to be okay." Danny tried to speak, to ask about Lily's safety, but his split lip and swollen face made coherent words nearly impossible. Mrs. Chun seemed to understand his concern without verbal communication. "Your sister is safe," she assured him, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "She's with Mr. Rodriguez and his wife. She's crying for you, but she's not hurt. You saved her, Danny. You saved your little sister." The confirmation that Lily was unharmed filled Danny with a profound sense of completion and peace that overwhelmed even the physical agony he was experiencing. The pain in his ribs, the throbbing in his broken nose, the stinging of his split lip, none of it mattered, compared to the knowledge that his sister was safe and would continue to be the bright, innocent child she had always been. Paramedics rushed into the house, their professional competence and gentle care a stark contrast to the violence that had just occurred in the same space. They worked quickly to assess Danny's injuries, checking for signs of internal bleeding or neurological damage while preparing him for transport to the hospital. "You're one tough kid," one of the paramedics said as he carefully immobilized Danny's neck and spine. "Your sister told us what happened, how you fought to protect her. That was incredibly brave." Through the haze of pain medication and exhaustion, Danny heard footsteps rushing through the destroyed doorway. Elena's voice, filled with terror and desperation, cut through the organized chaos of the emergency response. "Danny, oh God, Danny, where is he? Where's my son?" "Mom," Danny whispered, the word barely audible through his damaged face but carrying all the love and relief he felt at her return. Elena appeared in his limited field of vision, her face pale with shock and streaked with tears. She knelt beside the stretcher where the paramedics were preparing him for transport, her hands hovering over his injuries as if she could heal them through sheer force of maternal love. "I'm so sorry, baby," she sobbed, her voice broken with guilt and anguish. "I should never have left you alone. I should have known something was wrong. This is all my fault." Danny summoned what little strength remained to him, managing to move his hand just enough to touch his mother's fingers. "Not your fault," he whispered. "Lily's safe. That's what matters." Even through her tears and devastation, Elena felt her heart swell with pride at her son's words. In the worst moment of his young life, after enduring violence that would traumatize most adults, Danny's first concern was still for his sister's well-being. The boy who had been forced to grow up too quickly had proven himself to be the protector. He had always promised to be. As the paramedics loaded Danny into the ambulance, neighbors gathered around Elena to offer comfort and support. Mr. Rodriguez approached with Lily in his arms, the little girl's tear-streaked face brightening when she saw her mother. "Mommy," Lily cried, reaching for Elena with desperate need. "Danny saved me. The bad man wanted to take me, but Danny wouldn't let him." Elena gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her tightly while watching the ambulance disappear down Maple Street with her wounded son. The afternoon that had begun with such simple happiness, building block castles and planning family outings, had become a nightmare that would haunt all of them for years to come. But it was also the day that revealed the extraordinary courage that lived within her 9-year-old son, the day that proved love and determination could triumph over evil even when the odds seemed impossible. Danny Martinez had faced a monster and refused to yield. had absorbed tremendous punishment to protect someone he loved, had proven that heroes come in all sizes. The battle for Lily's life was over, and Danny had won through sheer force of will and love. The price had been terrible, but the victory was absolute. James Richardson's carefully orchestrated plan had been destroyed by the courage of a little boy who understood that some things were worth any sacrifice. As Elena held Lily and watched their neighbors work to secure the crime scene, she made a silent promise to her wounded son. She would never again underestimate the strength and wisdom that lived within him, would never again take for granted the extraordinary love that bound their small family together. Danny had proven himself to be not just her little boy, but her hero and protector. The Martinez family would heal from this trauma, would rebuild their sense of security and safety. But they would never forget the day that a 9-year-old boy stood against evil and refused to be moved. The day that love proved stronger than violence. The day that Danny Martinez became the hero he had always been meant to be. The emergency department at Riverside General Hospital buzzed with controlled urgency as Danny was wheeled through the automatic doors, his small body dwarfed by the adult-sized gurney and the array of medical equipment surrounding him. Elena ran alongside the stretcher, her hand maintaining contact with her son's arm while paramedics rattled off vital signs and injury assessments to the waiting trauma team. The sterile fluorescent lights illuminated the full extent of Danny's injuries with harsh clarity, his face a canvas of swelling and bruises, blood still seeping from his broken nose despite the paramedics' efforts to stem the flow. Dr. Patricia Williams, the same physician whose name had been used in the fraudulent emergency call that had lured Elena away from her children, met them at the trauma bay entrance. The irony wasn't lost on Elena, who recognized the name immediately and felt a chill of understanding about how thoroughly she and her family had been manipulated. "Miss Martinez," Dr. Williams said with genuine compassion as she began her preliminary examination of Danny, "I want you to know that I never called you earlier today. Someone used my name to deceive you, and I'm deeply sorry that our hospital was used as part of this terrible scheme." Elena nodded numbly, the confirmation of what she had already suspected hitting her like a physical blow. The phone call that had seemed so urgent and legitimate had been an elaborate trap designed to separate her from her children, leaving them vulnerable to a predator who had been planning this attack for months. The guilt she felt was crushing. As a nurse, she should have been more suspicious of medical information delivered over the phone without proper verification protocols. As the medical team worked to assess Danny's injuries, Elena found herself reliving every moment of her relationship with James Richardson, searching for warning signs she had missed, red flags that should have alerted her to the danger she was bringing into her children's lives. The charming businessman who had seemed like the answer to her prayers for companionship and stability had been systematically studying her family, learning their routines, identifying their vulnerabilities. Detective Maria Santos arrived at the hospital 45 minutes after the attack, her no-nonsense demeanor and kind eyes inspiring immediate confidence in Elena, a 20-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department with extensive experience in crimes against children. Detective Santos had seen enough evil in her career to recognize the signs of a sophisticated predator operation. She approached Elena in the family waiting area where Lily sat curled in her mother's lap, still clutching her stuffed rabbit and occasionally whimpering for her injured brother. "Miss Martinez, I'm Detective Santos. I've been assigned to investigate what happened to your family today. Before we begin, I want you to know that your son is a hero. What he did to protect his sister was extraordinary, and it may have prevented a tragedy beyond anything you can imagine." Elena looked up from stroking Lily's hair, her eyes red with tears and exhaustion. "I don't understand any of this. James seemed so normal, so kind. How could I have been so wrong about someone I was dating for 2 months?" Detective Santos pulled up a chair, her expression grave. "Miss Martinez, James Richardson isn't who he claimed to be. We've been tracking him for several weeks as part of a federal investigation into human trafficking. His real name is James Robert Weston, and he's part of an international network that specializes in the abduction and trafficking of young children." The words hit Elena like a sledgehammer. Human trafficking. The phrase belonged in news stories about distant countries and anonymous victims, not in the emergency room where her son lay battered and broken from protecting his sister. The reality of what Danny had prevented began to sink in, and Elena felt her stomach churning with nausea and terror. "When James fled your house, he dropped his cell phone in his panic," Detective Santos continued, pulling an evidence bag from her briefcase. "The device contained information that we've been trying to obtain for months. Miss Martinez, I need to prepare you for what we found because it's going to be very difficult to hear." Elena tightened her hold on Lily, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep in her arms. "Tell me everything. I need to know what my children were really facing today." Detective Santos opened a file folder, revealing printed screenshots from James's phone. "We found 47 photographs of Lily taken without your knowledge over the past 6 months. They show her playing in your yard, walking to school, even sleeping in her bed, taken through your living room window." Elena's blood turned to ice as she looked at the images. Each photograph had been taken with telephoto precision, capturing Lily's innocent activities with the clinical detachment of someone documenting merchandise rather than appreciating a child's beauty. The timestamps revealed a pattern of surveillance that had begun long before James had ever approached Elena, proving that their entire relationship had been a calculated deception from the very beginning. "He was watching us for months before we even met," Elena whispered, the violation feeling almost as profound as the physical attack on Danny. "Every conversation we had, every story I told him about the children, he was gathering intelligence." "It gets worse," Detective Santos said gently. "We found extensive internet searches about your family's routines, your work schedule at the hospital, Lily's kindergarten pickup times, even the security measures in your neighborhood. He knew when you worked night shifts, when the children would be alone, which neighbors were typically home during the day. The level of planning and preparation was staggering." Elena realized that James had engineered their meeting at the coffee shop near the hospital, had probably researched her interests and preferences to ensure their compatibility would seem natural and organic. Every flower he had brought her, every thoughtful gesture, every moment of apparent romantic connection had been part of an elaborate performance designed to gain access to her daughter. "We also found communications with other members of his network," Detective Santos continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much evil in her career. "They refer to Lily as blonde merchandise, age 5, California delivery. There are discussions about transportation methods, international routes, and pricing structures that indicate this wasn't a spontaneous crime, but part of a commercial operation." Elena felt bile rising in her throat. The casual, businesslike language used to describe her daughter as a commodity to be bought and sold was more horrifying than any violence she could have imagined. Lily wasn't seen as a human being with thoughts and feelings and dreams. She was inventory in some monstrous catalog of stolen children. The most disturbing discovery was a series of purchased airline tickets, Detective Santos said, pulling out another evidence bag containing printed boarding passes. "One adult and one child departing Los Angeles International Airport tomorrow morning at 9:15 a.m. Destination Bucharest, Romania." James had planned to complete the abduction today and have Lily out of the country within 18 hours. The timeline was terrifyingly precise. If Danny hadn't fought back, if he hadn't delayed James long enough for Lily to escape and neighbors to respond, Elena's daughter would have disappeared into an international trafficking network that spanned continents. She would have been transported to a foreign country where she didn't speak the language, where no one knew her real name or would come looking for her. Romania is a known destination for trafficked children, Detective Santos explained. The country has weak law enforcement cooperation with the United States, and there are established networks there that specialize in the exploitation of children like Lily. Once she had been transported there, the chances of recovery would have been virtually zero. Elena began to shake as the full scope of the danger became clear. This wasn't a random attack by a disturbed individual. It was a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had identified her daughter as a target and had spent months developing a plan to steal her. The romance with Elena had been nothing more than a cover story, a way to gain the trust and access necessary to study Lily's routines and vulnerabilities. "How many children have they taken?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "Based on the communications we've uncovered, James's network has been responsible for at least 12 abductions over the past 3 years. All young girls between the ages of 4 and 7, all with similar physical characteristics to Lily. Investigations in those cases have been largely unsuccessful because the children were transported out of the country before law enforcement could respond effectively." The number hit Elena like a physical blow. 12 other families had gone through the nightmare she had nearly experienced. 12 other mothers were living with the knowledge that their daughters had vanished into a criminal underworld that treated children as disposable commodities. The thought of those parents' ongoing anguish, their desperate hope that their children might somehow survive and return home, was almost unbearable. "But Danny stopped him," Elena said, her voice filled with wonder and pride despite the horror of the situation. "My 9-year-old son prevented all of this from happening." "Danny didn't just save his sister," Detective Santos replied with profound respect. "His courage today has given us the evidence we need to dismantle this entire network." The cell phone James dropped contains contact information for the other members of his organization, financial records showing how the operation was funded, and detailed plans for future abductions. "We've already coordinated with federal agencies to begin arrests in 4 different states." Elena looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms, her golden curls soft against Elena's chest, her small face relaxed in the innocent slumber that only children could achieve even after witnessing terrible events. It was almost impossible to believe that this precious child had been the target of such methodical evil, that strangers had spent months planning to steal her away from everything she knew and loved. The investigation also revealed something else, Detective Santos continued, hesitating as if uncertain whether Elena was ready for additional revelations. "James's interest in your family began 8 months ago, long before he approached you at the coffee shop. He had been following your social media accounts, studying photographs you posted of the children, learning about your work schedule and family routines from the information you shared online. The realization that Elena's own social media presence had been used to target her daughter added another layer of violation to the experience. Every proud mother's post about Lily's kindergarten achievements, every casual photograph of family outings, every mention of Elena's work schedule at the hospital had been intelligence gathered by someone planning to destroy their lives. We found screenshots of your Facebook and Instagram accounts going back months," Detective Santos explained. He had identified Lily as a potential target based on her photographs, then spent weeks studying your posts to learn when you worked night shifts, when the children were home alone, which neighbors were typically present during the day. Your social media presence essentially provided him with a blueprint for approaching your family. Elena felt a crushing sense of responsibility for the danger she had unknowingly brought into her children's lives. The innocent desire to share proud moments of motherhood to connect with friends and family through social media, had been exploited by someone who viewed those glimpses into their lives as intelligence for a criminal operation. Dr. Williams approached the waiting area with an update on Danny's condition, her expression serious but not alarming. "Miss Martinez, your son has sustained significant injuries but nothing that won't heal with time and proper care. He has a broken nose, severe bruising around both eyes, 3 cracked ribs, and multiple lacerations on his face. However, there's no sign of internal bleeding or neurological damage. Physically, he's going to make a complete recovery." Elena felt some of the tension leave her shoulders at the confirmation that Danny's injuries, while serious, wouldn't have lasting physical consequences. But she understood that the emotional and psychological impact of the attack would require much more time and care to heal. "Can I see him now?" Elena asked, desperate to hold her son and reassure herself that he was truly safe. "He's awake and asking for you and Lily," Dr. Williams replied with a gentle smile. "He's been very concerned about his sister's well-being and keeps asking the nurses to confirm that she's safe. Even with everything he's been through, his first priority is making sure Lily is okay." Elena felt her heart breaking and swelling with pride simultaneously. Even after enduring violence that would traumatize most adults, Danny's primary concern remained his sister's safety and emotional state. The boy who had been forced to grow up too quickly had proven himself to be not just brave, but fundamentally good in a way that no amount of evil could diminish. As they walked toward Danny's room, Detective Santos provided additional details about James's capture. "He was arrested 6 blocks from your house, trying to hotwire a car for his escape. The neighbors who witnessed the attack provided excellent descriptions, and Officer Martinez, no relation to your family, spotted him within minutes of the Bolo alert. He's currently in custody facing federal charges for attempted kidnapping, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, stalking, assault on a minor, and several other offenses." Elena paused outside Danny's hospital room, gathering her strength to face her injured son without breaking down completely. Through the small window in the door, she could see him lying in the hospital bed, his small body nearly lost among the white sheets and medical equipment. His face was swollen and discolored, bandages covering his broken nose, but his eyes were alert and focused. "What will happen to James now?" Elena asked, needing to know that the man who had targeted her family would never again be free to hurt other children. "The federal charges he's facing carry a minimum sentence of 25 years without possibility of parole," Detective Santos replied. "Given the evidence we've collected and the sophistication of the operation, the prosecutor is confident that James will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. He'll never again be in a position to hurt children." Elena nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction that justice would be served for the man who had nearly destroyed her family. But she also understood that the legal consequences for James, while important, were secondary to the healing that her children would need in the months and years ahead. When Elena entered Danny's room with Lily still in her arms, her son's face lit up with relief and joy that transcended his physical pain. Despite his injuries, his first words were not about his own condition but about his sister's well-being. "Is Lily okay, Mom? Did he hurt her? I tried to keep him away from her, but I was scared he might have gotten to her after I couldn't fight anymore." Elena set Lily down gently so she could hug her brother, watching through tears as the little girl carefully climbed onto the hospital bed to snuggle against Danny's uninjured side. The sight of her children comforting each other after surviving such a traumatic experience filled Elena with profound gratitude and love. "You saved her, Danny," Elena said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You saved your sister, and you saved other children too. The police told me that because of your courage, they caught the bad man and stopped him from hurting anyone else." Danny's swollen eyes filled with tears, not from pain but from relief and exhaustion. "I was so scared, Mom, but I couldn't let him take Lily. I couldn't let anything happen to her." Elena sat on the edge of the hospital bed, gathering both of her children into her arms as carefully as Danny's injuries would allow. They sat together in silence for several minutes, feeling the profound relief of being reunited and safe after coming so close to unimaginable tragedy. "I'm so proud of you," Elena whispered to Danny. "You were braver than any adult I know. You protected our family when I couldn't be there, and you proved that love is stronger than evil." As the afternoon turned to evening and the initial shock began to fade, Elena found herself thinking about the long road ahead. There would be therapy for all of them to process the trauma, security measures to implement to ensure their safety, and the ongoing challenge of helping Lily understand what had happened without destroying her innocence and trust in the world. But there would also be healing, growth, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that their family's love for each other had triumphed over the most sophisticated evil they could have imagined. Danny had proven himself to be not just her little boy, but a genuine hero whose courage had saved not only his sister, but potentially dozens of other children who might have become James's future victims. The Martinez family would emerge from this nightmare stronger, more united, and with an even deeper appreciation for the bonds that held them together. Danny's extraordinary courage had not only protected them from immediate danger, but had dismantled a criminal network that had been terrorizing families across the country. As Elena watched her children comfort each other in the hospital bed, she made a silent promise that she would spend the rest of her life ensuring that Danny's heroism was never forgotten, that Lily grew up understanding the extraordinary brother who had risked everything to protect her, and that their family would use this experience to help other victims of predators like James Richardson. The horrifying truth about what they had faced was now clear, but so was the even more powerful truth about the love and courage that lived within their small family. Evil had targeted them, but it had not conquered them. Love had proven stronger than violence, and the 9-year-old boy's determination had triumphed over a sophisticated criminal conspiracy. The Martinez family would heal, would rebuild, and would continue to protect each other with a fierce devotion that had saved them all. 6 weeks after the attack that had shattered their world and rebuilt it stronger, Danny Martinez sat in the sunny breakfast nook of their new apartment, carefully spooning cereal into his mouth while avoiding pressure on his still tender ribs. The morning light caught the fading yellow-green remnants of bruises around his left eye, marks that served as a daily reminder of the courage he had shown and the price he had paid to protect his family. His broken nose had healed straight and strong, though Elena sometimes caught him unconsciously touching it when he was deep in thought, as if reassuring himself that everything was still in its proper place. The new apartment was smaller than their old house on Maple Street, but it felt infinitely safer. Located in a gated community with 24-hour security and cameras at every entrance, it represented Elena's determination to ensure that her children would never again be vulnerable to the kind of predator who had nearly destroyed their lives. The walls were painted in warm, cheerful colors that Lily had helped choose, and every room was filled with the kind of security measures that would make a repeat of James's attack virtually impossible. "Danny, are you ready for today?" Elena asked gently, sitting down beside her son with her morning coffee. Today marked his return to Roosevelt Elementary School, after 6 weeks of home tutoring while his physical injuries healed and his emotional recovery progressed. The decision to return had been Danny's own, made with the support of his therapist and the confidence that came from knowing he had faced the worst thing imaginable and survived. "I think so," Danny replied thoughtfully, his voice carrying a maturity that seemed both natural and heartbreaking in a 9-year-old. "Dr. Martinez says I'm ready, and I miss my friends." Besides, Lily needs to see that everything can go back to normal. Elena felt her heart swell with pride at her son's consideration for his sister's emotional needs. Throughout their recovery, Danny had consistently prioritized Lily's healing over his own comfort, understanding instinctively that her ability to trust the world again depended partly on seeing him strong and confident. The boy who had protected her physically was now protecting her emotionally with the same selfless determination. Lily bounced into the kitchen wearing her favorite purple dress, a new one, since the old butterfly dress had been considered evidence. In James's prosecution, her golden curls bouncing with the irrepressible energy that had slowly returned over the past weeks. The nightmares that had plagued her sleep immediately after the attack had gradually faded with therapy and the constant reassurance that her brother and mother would always keep her safe. "Danny, will you walk me to my classroom?" Lily asked, climbing onto his lap with the casual affection that characterized their relationship. "I want to show everyone my brave big brother." Danny's smile was genuine and radiant, transforming his serious features into those of the little boy he still was beneath the extraordinary courage he had displayed. "Of course, Princess. I'll always walk you to your classroom." Elena watched their interaction with profound gratitude for the resilience children possessed and the healing power of sibling love. The trauma they had experienced could have damaged their relationship, could have left Lily afraid of the world or Danny burdened with guilt about not being able to prevent her fear entirely. Instead, their bond had grown even stronger, deepened by shared survival and mutual protection. The drive to school took them past their old neighborhood, where the house on Maple Street stood empty with a for sale sign in the front yard. Elena had decided within days of the attack that they could never live there again, that the memories of violence and violation would make it impossible for any of them to feel truly safe within those walls. The cheerful blue door had been replaced, but Elena knew that the real damage couldn't be repaired with fresh paint and new hardware. As they approached Roosevelt Elementary, Elena noticed several news vans parked along the street. Danny's story had captured national attention, becoming a symbol of childhood courage and family love that had resonated far beyond their small California community. The boy who had fought a human trafficker to protect his sister had become a hero to parents and children across the country, though Elena was careful to shield her children from most of the media attention. "Remember what we talked about," Elena said gently as they parked. "If any reporters try to talk to you, just keep walking and find Miss Rodriguez or Principal Thompson. You don't have to answer their questions or pose for pictures." Danny nodded seriously. He understood that his story had become public, but he also understood that his first responsibility was to his own healing and his family's privacy. The attention was flattering but also overwhelming for a 9-year-old who simply wanted to return to the normal routines of childhood. Principal Thompson met them at the school entrance, her warm smile and protective presence immediately making Elena feel better about leaving her children in someone else's care. The school had implemented additional security measures in response to Danny's situation, understanding that his heroism had made him a target for both positive and negative attention. "Welcome back, Danny," Principal Thompson said, kneeling down to his level. "We're all so proud of you, and we're excited to have our hero back in school." Danny's cheeks flushed with embarrassment and pride. "I just did what anyone would do to protect their sister." "No, sweetheart," Principal Thompson replied gently. "What you did was extraordinary, and it's okay to be proud of your courage. Heroes often don't realize how special they are." As Danny walked Lily to her kindergarten classroom, other students and teachers stopped to welcome him back with genuine warmth and admiration. The story of his fight with James had spread throughout the school community, and children who had once seen him as just another quiet classmate now looked at him with the kind of awe usually reserved for superheroes and Professional athletes. Miss Rodriguez, Lily's teacher, greeted them both with tears in her eyes. Lily has been telling everyone about her brave brother, she said, hugging Danny carefully to avoid his still tender ribs. She's very proud of you, and so are we all. Lily beamed as she showed Danny around her classroom, introducing him to friends who had heard stories about the big brother who had fought a monster to keep her safe. Her teacher had been working with a child psychologist to help the kindergarten class understand what had happened in age-appropriate terms, focusing on the themes of family love and protection rather than the darker aspects of human trafficking and predatory behavior. When Danny finally reached his own fourth-grade classroom, he was greeted by a banner that read, "Welcome back, Hero Danny," and the excited faces of classmates who had followed his story in kid-friendly news reports and their parents' conversations. His teacher, Mr. Williams, had prepared the class for his return by discussing courage, family responsibility, and the difference between real heroes and fictional ones. "Danny," said his best friend Marcus, approaching with the mixture of excitement and respect that characterized most of the children's reactions to his story. "Is it true that you fought a real bad guy? Like an actual criminal?" Danny considered the question carefully, understanding that his answer would influence how his classmates thought about danger and heroism. "I fought someone who wanted to. Hurt my family," he said simply. "I was scared, but I knew I had to protect my sister. Anyone would have done the same thing." But his classmates recognized something that Danny's modesty prevented him from acknowledging. Not everyone would have done the same thing. Most 9-year-olds would have been paralyzed by fear or would have run to save themselves. Danny's choice to stand and fight, to absorb tremendous punishment rather than abandon his sister, marked him as genuinely extraordinary. During lunch, Danny found himself surrounded by children eager to hear his story, to understand what it felt like to be a real hero. He answered their questions honestly but simply, always emphasizing that his actions had been motivated by love for Lily rather than any desire for glory or recognition. "Were you afraid when the bad man was hitting you?" asked Sarah Chun, a quiet girl whose own parents had used Danny's story to discuss family safety and protection. "I was terrified," Danny admitted without shame. "But being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared, especially when someone you love needs protection." His honesty and maturity impressed the adults who overheard the conversation. Here was a child who had experienced genuine trauma and had emerged from it with wisdom and perspective that many adults never achieved. Danny's understanding that courage was not the absence of fear but action in spite of it demonstrated an emotional intelligence that made his physical bravery even more remarkable. After school, Elena was waiting with Lily when Danny emerged from the building, his backpack slung over his shoulder and his expression tired but satisfied. The return to normal routines had been emotionally exhausting, but it had also been affirming in ways he hadn't expected. "How was your first day back?" Elena asked as they walked to the car together. "Good," Danny replied thoughtfully. "Different but good. Everyone was really nice, and I think things can go back to normal now. Well, the new normal anyway." Elena understood what he meant. Their lives would never be exactly the same as they had been before James Richardson entered their world. The innocence and casual trust they had once enjoyed were gone forever, replaced by heightened awareness and security measures that would always be part of their reality. But they had also gained something valuable, an unshakable confidence in their love for each other and their ability to survive whatever challenges life might present. That evening, Detective Santos called with news about James's prosecution. The federal case had progressed rapidly, aided by the overwhelming evidence found on his abandoned cell phone and the testimony of neighbors who had witnessed the attack. James had been offered a plea bargain in exchange for information about his criminal network, but had refused to cooperate, apparently believing that his expensive lawyers could somehow minimize the consequences of his actions. The trial is scheduled to begin in 3 months, Detective Santos informed Elena. The prosecutor is confident that we have an airtight case, and James is facing multiple federal charges that carry a combined sentence of life in prison without possibility of parole. Elena felt a grim satisfaction at the news. While she had no desire for revenge, she needed to know that James would never again be in a position to target children or manipulate vulnerable families. The thought of him spending the rest of his life in federal prison, unable to harm anyone else, provided a sense of closure that was essential to her family's healing process. Will Danny need to testify? Elena asked, hoping to spare her son the additional trauma of facing his attacker in court. Given the evidence we have, Danny's testimony probably won't be necessary, Detective Santos replied. The physical evidence, witness statements, and documentation found on James's phone provide more than enough proof of his guilt. We want to protect Danny from any additional stress while he's recovering. The news that Danny wouldn't have to relive his trauma in a courtroom setting was an enormous relief to Elena. Her son had already shown more courage than any child should ever have to display, and she was determined to shield him from any further involvement in the legal proceedings that would bring James to justice. 2 weeks later, Elena received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Patricia Williams at the hospital. Riverside General was planning to honor Danny with their annual Youth Courage Award, an honor traditionally reserved for teenagers who had overcome serious medical challenges or had shown exceptional bravery in emergency situations. Your son's actions that day were extraordinary, Dr. Williams explained. He not only protected his sister, but provided law enforcement with the evidence needed to dismantle an entire human trafficking network. The hospital board feels that his courage deserves recognition, and we'd like to present him with the award at our annual Heroes Gala next month. Elena was torn between pride in her son's recognition and concern about exposing him to more public attention. She discussed the invitation with Danny, leaving the decision entirely up to him. I think I'd like to accept the award, Danny said after careful consideration. Not because I want people to think I'm special, but because maybe other kids will learn that they can be brave too when their families need protection. His reasoning demonstrated the same selfless thinking that had motivated his fight with James. Even in accepting recognition for his heroism, Danny was focused on how his story might help other children rather than on personal glory or attention. Heroes Gala was held on a Saturday evening in the hospital's main conference center, decorated with blue and silver banners celebrating the year's honorees. Danny wore his best suit, a new one, since his growth spurt had made his old formal clothes too small, and carried himself with the quiet dignity that had characterized his public appearances since the attack. When his name was called, Danny walked to the podium with Elena and Lily beside him, his steps confident despite the attention of hundreds of adult strangers. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes, their applause recognizing not just his courage, but the profound love that had motivated it. Dr. Williams presented Danny with a crystal award engraved with his name and the words "for extraordinary courage in defense of family." As he accepted the heavy crystal piece, Danny looked out at the audience of doctors, nurses, hospital administrators, and community leaders who had gathered to honor him. "Thank you for this award," Danny said, his young voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "But I want everyone to know that I didn't fight that man because I wanted to be a hero. I fought him because I love my sister and I couldn't let anything happen to her. That's what families do. We protect each other." He paused, looking down at Lily, who was beaming with pride in the front row. Being brave isn't about not being scared. I was terrified that day. Being brave is about doing what's right even when you are scared, especially when someone you love needs protecting. Every person in this room would have done the same thing I did if their family was in danger. The simplicity and honesty of his words moved many in the audience to tears. Here was a child who had faced unimaginable evil and had emerged with his fundamental goodness not only intact but strengthened. His understanding that heroism was born from love rather than a desire for glory resonated with everyone who heard him speak. After the ceremony, Elena watched Danny interact with the other honorees, teenagers who had overcome cancer, young people who had saved drowning swimmers, children who had shown extraordinary compassion for others in need. He fit naturally among these remarkable young people, his own courage earning their respect and admiration. As they drove home that evening, Lily fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted by the excitement and late hour. Danny sat quietly in the passenger seat, turning his Crystal Award over in his hands and reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Elena asked, noticing his thoughtful silence. "I was just thinking about that day." Danny replied softly, "About how scared I was and how much everything changed afterward. But also about how much I love our family and how I'd do it all again if I had to." Elena felt tears burning her eyes at her son's words. The boy who had been forced to grow up too quickly had somehow managed to retain the pure heart that made him extraordinary. His courage hadn't been corrupted by recognition or attention. It remained rooted in the simple truth that love was worth any sacrifice. 6 months after the attack, Elena received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation informing her that James's criminal network had been completely dismantled. 14 arrests had been made across 4 states, and 12 children who had been trafficked by the organization had been rescued and returned to their families. Danny's courage in fighting James had not only saved Lily, but had ultimately led to the rescue of children whose families had given up hope of ever seeing them again. Elena shared the news with Danny that evening as they sat together in their secure apartment, watching Lily play with a dollhouse that had replaced many of her toys destroyed in the attack. The knowledge that his actions had helped save other children filled Danny with quiet satisfaction that was deeper than any public recognition. "Those families get to be together again because of what you did," Elena told her son. "Because you refused to give up, because you fought when it would have been easier to run, 12 other children are home safe with their parents." Danny absorbed this information with the serious consideration he gave to all important matters. "I'm glad they're okay," he said simply. "Every kid deserves to be safe with their family." As the 1-year anniversary of the attack approached, Elena was amazed by how much their lives had stabilized and healed. Danny had returned to being a normal 9-year-old in most ways. He played soccer, struggled with math homework, and argued with Lily about television shows. But there was a depth to his character, a quiet confidence and maturity that set him apart from his peers in subtle but meaningful ways. Lily had recovered even more completely. Her natural resilience and the security of knowing her brother would always protect her, allowing her to embrace childhood with renewed joy and innocence. She still occasionally asked Danny to check her bedroom for monsters, but these requests came with the absolute confidence that he would keep her safe from anything that might threaten her. The family's bond had been strengthened by their shared trauma and recovery. They talked openly about their feelings, celebrated small victories in their healing process, and never took for granted the love that had saved them all. Elena had learned to balance her protective instincts with Danny's need to be treated as the capable, courageous person he had proven himself to be. On the exact anniversary of the attack, Elena found Danny in his room, sitting on his bed and looking at the Crystal Award that held a place of honor on his bookshelf. She sat beside him, sensing that he was processing complex emotions about the day that had changed their lives forever. "Do you ever regret what happened?" she asked gently. "Do you wish things could have stayed the way they were before?" Danny considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "I wish James had never tried to hurt our family," he said finally. "I wish Lily didn't have to be scared, and I wish you didn't have to worry about our safety all the time. But I don't regret fighting him. I don't regret protecting Lily, and I don't regret learning how strong our family really is." His answer captured the complexity of their experience, the trauma and loss mixed with pride and newfound strength. They had paid a terrible price for their education about the evil that existed in the world, but they had also discovered reserves of courage and love that they might never have known they possessed. As Elena tucked both children into their beds that night in their secure apartment, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. They were not the same family they had been a year ago. They were stronger, more aware, more grateful for the simple gift of being together. And safe. Danny's extraordinary courage had not only saved them from immediate danger, but had taught them all that love was indeed stronger than evil, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when faced with the need to protect those they cherished most. The boy who had fought a monster to save his sister had grown into a young man who understood that true heroism came not from seeking glory or recognition, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. And as Elena watched him sleep peacefully in his bed, his face relaxed and innocent in repose, she knew that the courage he had shown would continue to guide him throughout his life, making him not just a protector of his family but a force for good in whatever corner of the world he chose to inhabit. Danny Martinez had proven that heroes come in all sizes, that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that sometimes the smallest person in the room is also the bravest. His story would continue to inspire others long after the physical scars of his battle had faded, a testament to the extraordinary courage that lives within ordinary families. When they are tested by extraordinary circumstances,